horrifying vampire lord massacres a village with no mercy, with the last few remaining survivors escaping. But one vows to seek vengeance, staying in hiding until the time is right. This person resurrects a powerful and brave warrior by the name of Ulric, who is instructed to fight against this demonic vampire lord. Ulric, being a werewolf now, resurrected 100 years after the bloody massacre, still carries the pain and rage of what happened to him and his people, willing to kill the vampire lord or die trying. Dreadmoon has an engaging rich lore with a co-op campaign DLC, which allows up to 8 players to play at the same time to take down this cruel vampire lord. Thanks to Fatal Fuck Studios, this video is sponsored and I have been given a key to access the DLC. Make sure to get a copy of the game by clicking on the link in the description or the card above to be redirected to the game page on Steam. In a far, far land where a demonic vampire lord resides in his castle, people of the nearby village manage to ward off this hostile and sadistic being by utilizing a spell which seals his hostility and curse within his castle, preventing him from raining terror on people. That seems to work for centuries until an unfortunate era where a group of people wanting power and wealth decide to invade and usurp the current system and royalty. With the senseless violence ensuing, light upon the village, with many of the wise circle of people dying, the seal starts to weaken, which eventually breaks, letting the bloodthirsty vampire lord finally get out of his castle and mercilessly massacre the village, killing anyone in his way, unleashing the force of the undead minions. Unfortunately for the people who meet the brutality of the vampire lord called Balthazar, their suffering doesn't end with their death, as their descendants and offsprings become imprisoned and enslaved for centuries to come. In the midst of all this, a group of brave men and women rise against this cruel entity, fighting to protect the village and its people, with one, known as Ulric, being the leader of this resistance group, who all unfortunately die under the hands of the vampire lord, leading to the village falling under ruins and complete control of Balthazar. With every remaining person dead in the village, all living people escape in order to live, with only one survivor called Louisa, being the last of her kind, who lives on in hiding, making a vow to keep the memory of the village and its people, making Balthazar pay for what he had done. 100 years go by, with Louisa using her magic to keep herself hidden, who eventually manages to resurrect the bravest of the resistance group, Ulric, in order to seek vengeance against Balthazar. Ulric, for the bravery that he showed, is resurrected as a werewolf, given superhuman powers and strength in order to face the army of Balthazar and his undead goons. As Ulric awakens from his 100-year-old sleep, a mysterious voice telepathically speaks to him, guiding him through a vaguely familiar land which he used to roam on. The voice tells Ulric that in order for him to be resurrected, he had to be bitten by this person. This reveals that the mysterious person is a werewolf herself, hence explaining how she managed to survive this long, still carrying the painful memory of the brutal massacre, having all her family and friends butchered. Managing to meet with the mysterious person who spoke with Ulric, he witnesses how she is a werewolf, someone who lost her family and her people, just like humans in the village, seeing Ulric as a last resort to seek justice and instate balance to the land, ridding it from the savage vampire. The stranger, known as Louisa, explains that she has gifted Ulric superhuman powers and life to fight this evil, as he showed valor in his past life. Louisa hands over a strange contraption to Ulric, something that he has never seen before. A mixture of metal and wood with a trigger which packs a powerful firepower, simply known now as a gun. Ulric lived in an era where firearms did not exist and were not developed yet, having to battle his enemies face-on in close combat, using swords, hence why Louisa has set up a target practice course for Ulric so that he can practice and get used to guns. After some target practice, Ulric goes to the catacombs and caves to retrieve a skull of a vampire lord, where he faces many of the minions who are reanimated dead, twisted in the shape of people to cause a mental warfare. warfare. As Ulric bravely sweeps through the minions of the vampire, he notices that he has the fury of werewolves, which allows him to have a brief moment of unstoppable strength, using his claws to take down all the enemies and sweep through them. As he manages to obtain the skull, he takes it back to Louisa, who explains using the skull allows her to open portals created by her people throughout time. Sadly, werewolves were hunted throughout time, with humans not being any better, who took the werewolves' lands and dwindled their numbers. However, this had been done centuries ago, before the time of Louisa or Ulric, with Balthazar's reign risking the extinction of both humans and werewolves, hence why a werewolf, Louisa, has decided to side with a brave human warrior, making him join their side to take down this big threat, for the sake of both of them and both their people and the ones who perished. Louisa then passes a wisp to Ulric, explaining this wisp will be her spirit, which will guide him in this perilous task. As Ulric goes through the portal, he comes across the horrors that his people had endured, dying in mass, with their remains still left behind scattered throughout the village.
A painful sight, is it not? Your former home, now a haunting testament to Balthazar's reign. But we are not here to mourn the past, Ulric. Our path begins here. Prepare yourself. Only by wading through the darkness will we finally bring light back to this land.
Infuriated and angry, Ulric continues on, managing to find different types of throwable items, acting similar to grenades, and different types of weapons such as shotguns, sniper rifles, miniguns, crossbows, and much more. As Ulric reaches a viewpoint, he sets his gaze upon a place which Balthazar labeled as his farmland. Louisa assumes humans are still kept there as prisoners or slave labor force, which Ulric can free. These are humans who have been kept as slaves or prisoners throughout generations, with their ancestors being the very first humans who had lost their land to Balthazar. As Ulric steps into the farm, it becomes clear why it has been labeled as such, as Balthazar has been growing and breeding his beasts in, which are like demonic wild boars who attack Ulric. As Ulric manages to step into the barn where his people would be seemingly kept in, he comes to an unforgiving sight of bloodshed, where his people were savagely butchered, people who were alive not long ago. This brings shame and sadness to Louisa, who feels horrible for what has happened, not believing what she sees through the wisp, being speechless. Managing to go through another portal, Ulric reaches a place which has a massive dam built, which has created a new stream, confusing Louisa to why Balthazar would do it. She understands for whatever reason it is, it's better to be destroyed, instructing Ulric to gather some explosives to destroy it. In the meantime, it becomes clear Balthazar is aware of Louisa and Ulric's presence, as he is trying to get control over the wisp through using his magic.
The river far below. Perhaps that was Balthazar's first... he's trying to... wrest control of the wisp. We have to keep moving.
Coming across a map of all the rivers, it becomes clear to why Balthazar has built a dam here. There's an old fable which mentions vampires find it difficult to cross over rivers, hence explaining he intends to block all the rivers in order to allow himself free passage around the land and fully conquer what has been the domain of humans or werewolves alike.
Is that a map of rivers? Why that old fable of vampires being unable to cross rivers, could that apply to his magic? Spirits. He's not using the moving the rivers! Ulric, quickly. We need to destroy this place.
With different and more powerful minions of Balthazar, Ulric moves quickly, killing as many as he can. Then he takes explosives, planting them across the dam and blowing it up in order for the river to flow freely. Flooding the new developments, Ulric goes to the next portal, approaching the castle where Balthazar resides within. Entering the castle, Louisa in a saddened voice explains how her magic is becoming fainter and weaker. A place which belonged to her people, a place which has been corrupted corrupted and twisted, with each word showing how her heart aches seeing what has become of her land and people. She encourages Ulric to push on. Getting further and further into the castle, the enemies become stronger and more in number, with some enemies even having resemblance to werewolves, being known as werebats, which seem to be equivalent of werewolf but in vampire term. As Ulric pushes on, managing to take on armies after armies of minions, the wisp of Louisa dies down, being replaced by Balthazar, who has a lot more power in his own domain, being his castle. Being in the main castle where he resides now, he ridicules Ulric for daring to step foot in his domain, someone he personally killed 100 years ago, a time when Ulric was human and battled Balthazar. Interestingly, Balthazar doesn't seem worried about Ulric's presence. If anything, he feels entertained and dares Ulric to face him in his castle, guiding him through. Balthazar explains that there are 3 gatekeepers which keep a spell on the castle to prevent any intruders from coming in and any risk of Balthazar's reign coming to an end. Moving through the castle, Balthazar explains that they use humans as meat in order to feed on, hence explaining what happened to the people that were kept in the barn, people Louisa had hope of saving, even though she is not a human herself, depicting her purity of heart and empathy. It seems as if Balthazar has been breeding humans through generations, keeping them like livestock in his farm in order to feed on and sustain his armies of undead. Managing to slay the first gatekeeper, Balthazar starts feeling threatened, unleashing a series of insults and mind games, telling Ulric how no matter what he does, he will never be able to undo or unlive the things that have been done, and the people who died in tragedy will never be revived. Going down to the basement of the castle shows a grim scene of how much blood has been drained from human victims, all in order to satiate the never-ending thirst and hunger of the vampire lord and his minions. One of the rooms in the basement reveals a more tragic fate of the selectively bred humans who are wrapped and suspended upside down, kept and stored as food for later feasts, and of course many of them being drained of their blood. Horrified and angered by this sight, more and more evidence of torture and mistreatment of humans is shown, with a room dedicated to torture with many remains left behind. Balthazar in fact kept these jails, torture chambers and rooms close by in order to satisfy his sadistic desires, hearing the screams and pain of his victims. Eventually, after a long and challenging battle with Balthazar's minions, Ulric manages to reach his chamber, where he is excitedly waiting for him. Having a cruel and nasty character, Balthazar goes on taunting Ulric even more, showing how he has captured the wisp of Louisa, effectively destroying her spirit. Louisa being seemingly dead now, having suffered a painful and tragic end, she leaves Ulric with one final request: to end the reign of Balthazar and free the land and himself, showing the true quality of hers, still showing valor and courage in the face of death, and a painful one at that. That's when Ulric goes on to face Balthazar head-on, seeking vengeance for the century-long terror that he has put on people and werewolves alike. The way Balthazar can be defeated is through shattering the cathedral's window and letting moonlight shine in, which seems to somehow weaken him. After a brutal and challenging battle, Ulric finally manages to take Balthazar down, who despite having failed and lost, taunts Ulric more and more, with Ulric putting an end to it, leading to the castle crumbling down, achieving the impossible, putting an end to his reign and killing him once and for all, something none has been able to do before, and all that came from the support of a werewolf, having the courage of a human, and power and will of a werewolf. With Balthazar gone, Ulric stands over the village, which has now a bright future ahead of itself, being freed from the brutality of a vampire lord who drank their blood and ate their flesh, never forgetting the sacrifice Louisa made, which would hopefully be a testament to the sacrifice of werewolves to save humanity. The story comes to an end in here, but there's still so much more to explore. I really enjoyed the game and I highly recommend you to continue the adventure yourself and unlock many of the achievements throughout the game. Currently, you can play the campaign with up to 8 players using a wide array of weapons in your arsenal and making the experience much more fun. You can click on the card above or the link in the description to play this explosive shooter for yourself. The game is available to buy now and comes with a free multiplayer versus mode. As always, it's been your host Star. Thank you guys for being here, and I will see you on another one. Have a fantastic day.